to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and it is that time of year again where we give our season predictions. And I'll be honest, I'm not looking forward to this, just for the fact when I look back at my predictions from last season, was completely wrong, was not close. And I'm sure it's going to wind up being the same way again, but you know, it's all fun and it's cool to go back and listen to yourself how excited you were or not excited you were for the regular season. And it feels like it was just the other day that we ended the 2023 MLS season. Here we are, a day away from the Union's first game of the season, the first game in the two-leg series against Saprissa in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And by the way, I'll go ahead and get it out of the way. If you guys are looking for a preview for this game, Jose Nunez of AAT Sports is going to have you covered with that match preview sometime later tonight, Tuesday morning. I'm not sure when he's going to release that, but if you guys are looking to get all things Saprissa, Jose is going to have Eddie Mendez on the podcast, who, don't forget, 2 years ago it was now, maybe 3 years, 3 years ago. Wow, time flies. 3 years ago is the last time the Union played Saprissa in the Champions League. And Eddie was on this podcast. He knows all things Costa Rica soccer. So it's going to be a great episode there for you guys. If you guys are learning or wanting to learn more about Saprissa, head over to AAT Sports Across the Pitch on YouTube and wherever you guys get your podcasts. They will release wherever. So I just wanted to get that out of the way real quick. But it's interesting to me where we had media availability last week with players from all around MLS, and Daniel Gazdag was one of those players that spoke to the media. And I had asked Daniel, you really only got a month of an off season, and then it was back to the grind of preseason, and now the games are gonna start coming thick and fast. And how's your body feeling, Daniel? And Daniel said, yeah, it wasn't that long of an off season. Yeah, we're so hurt how the game ended against Cincinnati, but majority of the guys, we were just looking forward to getting back to playing soccer. So having that mindset that, yeah, these guys are ready. It doesn't matter that they only had a month of a off season. They're ready to get going, ready to avenge what happened to them in the playoffs against FC Cincinnati. And we'll see if the Union can do it this season. A lot to talk about, a lot of predictions to get through, and I don't want to make this episode 2 hours long, so we'll get straight into it. First off, talking about the 2024 leading goal scorer for the Union. It was back-to-back seasons now that the Union have had the highest scoring trio in MLS with Mikael Uhre, Julian Kranz, and Daniel Gazdag. They scored 37 goals last season, but last year was a regression for this offense. And the team, of course, as a whole, but notably the offense. They scored 57 goals last year, which was down 15 from 2022. The Union created the 10th most scoring chances last year with 72. And creating chances wasn't an issue for this team last year. The issue was finishing. The Union bring back Kai Wagner and Alejandro Bedoya. Both of those players won the top 5 last year for the club in creating chances. But the biggest question is, can the Union find the back of the net more consistently? The Union's 32.5 shots on target percentage was amongst the worst in MLS last season. And surely it's got to be better. Surely it will be better this year, you would think. And so I expect the Union to create chances just like they did last year, and we'll get to that in a second. But if I'm looking at it from a whole, my 3 top goal scorers for the Union, I would say Mikael Uhre, and this is ambitious, I know, 15 goals. Daniel Gazdag got 14. He's done it the last 2 seasons. Why can't he get 14 again for a 3rd season? And Julian Kranz with 9. Now, this is just for MLS we're talking about. Once we start talking about the other competitions, I'll bring that up. But right now, the stats I'm going over are just MLS focused only. Julian Kranza could leave the club in the summertime with less than 6 months left on his deal, or a team can wait until the winter of 2025 and get him on a free. I think what I ultimately see happening, I think the Union move him on in the summertime just to try to get something. And yes, Julian Kranza can turn down any accepted deal that the Union may accept in the summertime, just like he did in the winter. And you might be saying, well, why would a team pay anything right now for Julian when they can just get him on free? But my argument would be, okay, let's say there's two teams that are interested in Julian Kranza in the summertime. And Julian's open to go into both of those teams. Well, who's to say that, one of those teams don't get desperate enough and say, hey, look, we want Julian right now in the preseason to learn our system and everything. We'll pay a transfer fee just to get him in here as opposed to waiting for him to come in the wintertime. So will a team get desperate? It's hard to say, but if there is a bidding war between multiple clubs where Julian Kranza is opening to going to X amount of clubs, then the Union may be able to get something. It's not going to be the millions of dollars that they potentially could have got, $7+ million, which we heard they turned down from Olympiacos during the summertime. I don't think it's going to be that. Anywhere between 1 to 2, I would feel comfortable with, just because, like I said, he has less than 6 months remaining on his contract come the summertime. So it's not going to be a crazy transfer fee. Yeah, there's the possibility that Julian signs a contract extension, hoping and helping the Union get a big transfer fee for him. But when it's this close, when there's been multiple offers for Julian, he's turned down offers, you know that there's interest there. And teams looking at him, well, look, we can get him for a free. Why pay anything? And we wait. In the wintertime, we'll get him for free. And I think that seems likely that Julian doesn't sign a contract extension. Like I said, I'm hopeful that teams get desperate and want Julian in the summer as opposed to in the winter. And I don't think Julian's going to be here for the whole season, so that's why I have him at 9. If Julian wouldn't have been here if Julian would have been here through the whole season, then I think he probably would have been the leading goal scorer for the club. But yeah, I'll go with 9 because I'm going to expect him to leave. But let's say that Julian does leave in the summertime. Who's going to step up? Ty Baribo will have a full season with the club. Marcus Anderson will be given chances. But who else is going to step up in that goal scoring department other than the front three? 11 different goal scorers last year other than Daniel Carranza and Ua, with Jose Martinez leading the pack with 3 goals. So a lot of questions. I remember vividly saying this team lacks a goal scorer coming off the bench. And on paper, okay, you have a couple different attackers. You feel confident. We didn't know that Ty Baribo at the beginning of last season was going to come in the summertime. And so I do feel confident that they have players to come off the bench. But the question is, how many goals do they score? I'm not sure. You would hope that somebody coming off the bench scores more than Jose Martinez's 3 goals when he's not a striker. Quinn Sullivan with 1 goal. They didn't have that goal scorer coming off the bench. So you hope that different players can contribute multiple goals this season. So I think 54 goals this year seems like a fair number in the MLS regular season for the Union, especially if Julian Kranza does wind up leaving in the summertime. Looking at the assist leaders, the Union had 35 assists last year from their team, with Kai Wagner leading the way with 7. I do believe now that Kai Wagner is here for a good old while, no questions. Okay, will he leave? Will he not leave? I think it's pretty solidified that he's going to be here for this whole season. 9 assists. I believe that Kai Wagner is going to have this year. And let's go ahead and put this on the record right here, too. Not talking the MLS assist, not talking the hockey assist. We're talking about straight up assists. Kai Wagner into X player that scores a goal. I think Kai Wagner is going to have 9 assists this year. I think Jack McGlynn is going to have 7. Even if Leon Flach was healthy, even when Leon Flach gets healthy, I think McGlynn looks to be that solidified starter on the left-hand side of the field. Only 15 starts last year in MLS for McGlynn with 27 matches total in MLS. He only had 1 assist. Surely he'll have more, so I'm going with 7 assists for Jack McGlynn. And then Daniel Gazdag with 6. He had 5 last year for the Union. And yeah, people want him to create a little bit more chances. And I'm with you. I want Daniel to create more, to play better balls into the front 2. But the fact of the matter is he was still in the top 5 of the Union's chance creators. One of the better chance creators in MLS, even though he only had 6 assists. Sorry, he didn't have 5, 6 assists last year. But regardless, I think Daniel will come back this season with 6 assists and be a key player for the Union this season. Let's go ahead and look at the players that the Union had lost and the players that the Union have signed. And so we know that the Union traded away Andres Pereira to New York City. Brandon Craig is loaned out to El Paso. Nelson Pierre has been loaned out to Sweden. Richard Odata remains on loan in Denmark. Anton Sorensen's contract was not picked up, so he was a free agent. Joe Bendick, not re-signed. He wound up signing a contract with Vancouver Whitecaps. And then there's reports out there. Jose Nunez reported that Joaquin Torres will be loaned out this season to Chilean side, Universidad Católica. And so it's not a huge loss, in my opinion. Losing Joaquin Torres didn't do much last year, but you are losing a little bit of depth there. What will the Union do to replace him? Because I do ultimately think they need to replace Joaquin Torres, but that are the players that the Union have lost in this offseason. Players signed or re-signed were Kai Wagner, Alejandro Bedoya, Sanders Ngagbo, Marcus Anderson, Oliver Semla, Hamir Bradesio, Isaiah LaFleur, and Nick Pariano. You guys feel comfortable, confident in the players that the Union brought in? A lot of young players there, and I think we talked about that the last episode. It's been a minute since we last recorded a podcast, so I forget exactly what we talked about. But yeah, I mean, the players that they brought in don't really excite, do they? You look around MLS, and we'll get there in a second, at the players being brought in by these clubs, and you can't help but wonder that, yeah, the Union should have. They could have done more, and maybe they do. The transfer window is still open for MLS, and maybe something changes by the time that you guys listen to this podcast, but let's be honest. I doubt it. Let's look at our Union awards, and then we'll go ahead and predict each competition, look at the schedule, and talk about the Eastern and Western Conference, and we'll pretty much wrap up the episode there. And so my predicted Union yearly awards: best defender, I'm going with Kai Wagner. Newcomer of the Year, Saunders Ngagbo. Homegrown of the Year, Jack McGlynn. Biggest disappointment this season would be, the Union are running it back yet again. That core group of players are still here. The Union have to win something. They have to win some trophy this year, whether it be MLS Cup, CCC, Leagues Cup, Supporters Shield. They got to win something. U.S. Open Cup, maybe, who knows what's going on with that. But regardless, I mean, the Union need a trophy. If you're running it back for a 3rd straight season, you got to do it. And then my Union MVP on the year would be Kai Wagner. I think Kai Wagner is going to have a terrific season once again for the Union. Like I said, last year he was my Union MVP. Best season in a Union jersey for Kai Wagner. And yeah, I think he's going to keep that consistency. I think he's going to continue to prove that he's the best left back in MLS. He's one of the best players in MLS, one of the best players on the Philadelphia Union team. And that is my team MVP. So my predictions for each competition: my champions, Cup prediction. Why not 3 straight years? Or 3 times in being in this competition, reaching the semifinal. I don't know if the Union have enough to reach the final, but if you look at the path, it's pretty easy. And maybe that's a little bit of a wild take, but the Union are definitely on the better side of the bracket. You feel confident that the Union can go a decent ways in this competition. And yes, there's a possibility that the Union could play Copa America again, but just looking at the bracket, the way that this lines up, yeah, I do feel confident that the Union could reach the semifinals again. I mean, if they beat Saprissa, they play Pachuca. It's going to be a tough game, but I think it's a winnable game. I think it's a doable game for the Union, and you wouldn't see Club America until the semifinals. I mean, there is Chivas as well. So I mean, one of those teams, Chivas or Club America, in the semifinals for the Union, a difficult task, nonetheless. But I don't see why the Union couldn't get to the semifinals yet again this season. For Leagues Cup, the Union, they were impressive last year, but they're not going to have home field advantage throughout this whole tournament, something that they had throughout all Leagues Cup last year. It reached them into a third place win over Monterrey. I think the Union are probably going to reach the quarterfinals this year. Supporter Shield, I think the Union are going to finish in 6th. And if US Open Cup happens this year, I think the Union will get knocked out in the first round whenever they join the competition. Normally, they've joined around the round of 32, so who knows what's going on with US Open Cup this year, but we'll see what happens. And right away, I mean, you're listening to me talk, and well, there's no trophy there for the Union in any of those competitions you just said. And if I have the Union in 6th in the Supporter Shield, that means they're not winning the Eastern Conference in the regular season. But we'll get to that here in a little bit. So looking at the schedule, and this schedule is absolutely brutal. It's absolutely brutal, and it's expected. Nobody can say that it's unexpected. I mean, just some quick thoughts looking at it. Majority of the games, 32 potential games the Union could play if they advance in all these competitions, just not including Leagues Cup because we don't know the full schedule for that yet. In 32 games, the Union can play on 3 to 4 days rest. It's plenty of Union soccer for you guys. It's not the worst thing in the world. You guys definitely won't complain about all the soccer that you're watching of the Union. But for these guys, yeah. We heard complaining last year from Andre Blake and other players around the league about how it's crazy, how it's ridiculous, the amount of games that they're playing, how the schedule is so congested. And it's going to happen once again. 9 out of the 17 first half games in MLS for the Union are at home. 6 out of 10 of those games, though, are against Western Conference opponents. So the Union get rid of their Western Conference schedule all at the beginning of the season, which I don't think is a bad thing. You focus on your conference the rest of the season. You look at the teams that you got to chase. You got to look at the teams that, okay, let's start to build a gap between them. And so you got to win your conference games. So I don't mind having all the Western Conference opponents knocked down in the first 10 games. Not a bad thing. The last 10 games, the Union had 5 home, 5 away, just like they did last year. 3 out of 5 away games against playoff teams. Red Bulls, Orlando, and Columbus. 4 out of 5 home games are against playoff teams. And one thing I think that makes this season so difficult is that there's going to be players missing throughout the whole season, whether it be because of friendlies, whether it be because of Nations League, whether it be because of Euro qualifiers, whether it be Olympic games, Olympic preparation games, World Cup qualifying games, players are going to be missing. And it's a huge blow for the Union. It's going to be a huge blow. But not only that, and I was talking to Kyle Almany about this last week or 2 weeks ago. I said, yeah, it might look dire for the Union with them to miss multiple players throughout the season. But the thing is, it's not just the Union. It's going to be teams all throughout MLS. And so I think this year is not going to be like last year where you saw Cincinnati run away with the league. You're not going to see... I feel confident saying there's not going to be 65 plus points this season from any team in MLS, just because there's so many competitions. You have the Euros going on, you have Copa America, you have the Olympics going on. All these different qualifying games going on. Teams are going to be hurting. And so I'd be shocked if we see any team come away, like I said, with 65 plus points this year. I don't see it happening. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we see a new points total this year. I doubt it, but you never know. And so we're looking at, during the Euros, guys like and maybe Ty Baribo, depending on if Israel qualify. You have June 14th through July 14th for the Euros. There's 8 potential games missed there if Hungary and Israel go all the way. 8 potential games missed for those 2 players. Union cannot afford to lose Daniel Gazdag, but it's going to happen. Copa America, Damian Lowe, Andre Blake, Jose Martinez, Jesus Bueno, June 20th through July 14th. 7 potential missed games there. You have the Summer Olympics. McGlenn Harriel, maybe Quinn Sullivan, July 24th, August 10th. 2 regular season games missed maybe, plus Leagues Cup. And so the summertime for the Union is going to be brutal. And so when I go over, my wins, my losses, that's why. Because the Union are going to be missing so many players. They're going to be missing players during March because of qualifying games, because of Nations League, because of friendlies. And it's going to hurt this team. And so the first game of the season home opener against Chicago Fire, I have that as a win. The next MLS game away at Sporting Kansas City, I have that as a loss. Seattle at home, win. Austin, loss. Portland away, loss. Minnesota at home, win. Nashville away, have that as a draw. Atlanta away, loss. RSL home, win. DC United away, win, because why not? Orlando away. Orlando at home, draw. New York City at home, draw. New England away, I have that as a win. Charlotte away is a loss. Toronto at home, a win. Montreal at home, a win. But that could get a little tricky, though. That game could get moved from June 1st if the Union make it all the way to the CONCACAF Champions Cup final, which is on June 2nd. So it's a game to pay attention to. Don't be surprised if that game gets moved. Don't be surprised if the Union are in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And then June 15th, Miami at home. I have that as a draw. Away in Cincinnati, a loss. A win against Charlotte at home. Then the Union go up to Montreal. I have that as a loss. Then to Chicago, away, a draw. Then New York Red Bulls at home, a win. Toronto away, a win. New England and Nashville, both of those are games at Subaru Park. I have them as a draw. Columbus depends on, how far the Union go in League's Cup. We could see the Union have a short rest day. We could see them have a long rest day. Who knows? But regardless, have that as a draw against Columbus, the reigning MLS winners. And then away at New York Red Bulls, a win. Away at Inter Miami, loss. Away at New York City, a draw. Home against DC United, win. Home against Atlanta United, a loss. Away in Orlando, a loss. Away in Columbus, draw. And then they finish the season out with Cincinnati at home. And I have that as a draw. So a lot to keep track there. So overall, I have the Union going 13, 10, and 11. That's good for 50 points. 2, 4, and 3 during the Copa/Euro stretch in the summertime, with 5 out of 9 of those games at home. I think the Union are going to struggle massively without Andre Blake, without Daniel Gazdag. Record at home overall in MLS, 9-7 and 1 loss. A lot of draws, I know, but a lot of competitions. And then away, I have the Union going 4, 4, and 9. And yeah, I mean, this season is just so hard to predict with all the different competitions. And again, I'll repeat myself. I don't think anybody in MLS is going to have 65 plus points. Just no way. If they do, I don't know. I don't know. I'll be shocked. I'd be curious. What do you guys think? Do you guys think with the amount of tournaments this year? Be curious what Jim Curtin thinks or the players. Do you guys think that it's possible that anybody in MLS hits 65 plus points this year? I'd be shocked if anybody tells me, yeah. I'd honestly be shocked. But let's go ahead and look at my predictions for the Eastern Conference. And I always over prepare for these things. I always put so much information in them to try to get you guys caught up. So let's see how much I read word for word from. We'll start with the Eastern Conference because that's going to take longer, I feel like. In 15th place, I have Toronto. This was the worst club in MLS last year by far. And they did nothing, absolutely nothing to improve this squad. A team that lost 15 of the last 16 games last year. And you guys know, the only win they had in those last 16 games came against the Philadelphia Union. Both of the Italians are still at the club despite rumors that both players were unsettled in Toronto. Both players wanted to leave. Well, they're still there. Former Canada men's national team manager John Herdman has got a really tough task this season with Toronto, but I have them finishing in 15th. In 14th, I have CF Montreal. Montreal has a new manager in charge this season, former Columbus 2 manager Laurent Courtois. Columbus almost made it back-to-back MLS Next Pro champions under Courtois' leadership. Monterrey have had a busy offseason, bringing back former Montreal goalkeeper Sebastian Breza from Bologna. Joseph Martinez was signed in free agency. Last play we know into Miami. Was not the same player he was in Atlanta. We'll see what he has left to offer. Brought in Matias Cucaro from Hurricane in Argentina, where he scored 31 goals in 110 games. And then they brought in very promising Bulgarian midfielder Dominik Yankov. And so I do think Montreal did a little bit more than I expected they would do in the offseason. But a new manager, first time managing a first team, it's going to be some learning. A lot of players that haven't played the kind of system that Courtois wants to play. So it's going to be a learning curve in Montreal this season. And so I have Montreal in 14th place. In 13th, I have Chicago Fire. Frank Klopas was named the manager for a second time in Chicago after serving as the interim manager for most of last season. Chicago spent big bringing in former Genk striker Hugo Cypers for a reported fee of $12 million, which is insane. And Chicago, under new ownership, they have the money to spend, and it hasn't worked out for them since they've been doing it with Shaqiri, with Jairo Torres. Will it work with Hugo? We'll see. Kylian Acosta was signed in free agency. They traded for Andrew Gutman and Tom Barlow. The club also moved on from Jairo Torres and Kasper Schmeichel, with both players severely disappointing in their times in Chicago. And I don't care how much money you splash, the way this team's still constructed, I think there's still going to be some tearing down they're going to need to do before this club gets back into the playoffs. And it starts with getting rid of Shaqiri. Absolutely starts with Shaqiri. Not the player he once was. And yeah, he's a big jersey to sell, a big name player, but he's not playing like the name on the back of the jersey. In 12th, I have Charlotte. And this is another club that brought in a new manager for the upcoming season. Former Aston Villa manager Dean Smith to guide Charlotte back into the playoffs. A little bit confusion, maybe, why Charlotte would fire the manager last season after getting them into the playoffs. But regardless, they did. They bring in Dean Smith, and I'm not sure how Dean's going to do in his first season. Just like Chicago, I think there's a lot of players that are going to have to be moved on. Yes, they started with getting rid of Kamil Josiak. They loaned out Karol Swiderski, who had 25 goals in 70 appearances. But Dean Smith felt comfortable getting rid of Swiderski. They opened up a DP spot. What will Charlotte do with the remainder of the transfer window open? Surely come summertime, they're going to have new DPs in here under Dean Smith. Again, like I said, just like Chicago, there's a lot of pieces that they've got to continue to move out in Charlotte. And so I do have Charlotte missing out of the playoffs this season. In 11th, DC United. DC United, they finally got something right. After all these years with the hiring of Troy Lezane, the former interim manager at New York Red Bulls last season, DC United were busy clearing out a majority of the players that were under Wayne Rooney, but none bigger than trading Chris Durkin to St. Louis. And DC United also brought in Aaron Herrera and Chris McVie in trades from Montreal and Inter Miami, respectively. I think Troy's an outstanding manager. I think he's going to get this group playing the way he wants. They're going to be high pressing. They're going to make you uncomfortable on the ball. But I don't think Troy necessarily has all the pieces he needs to play that system. And just like Charlotte, just like Chicago, this is going to be one of those seasons of just continuing to just burn it down, to start from scratch. And DC United are going to have a busy season this year, just trying to change that club culture. And like I said, I think they've done a terrific job, number one, hiring Troy as the manager going forward. In 10th, and this one pains me, Nashville. And they're a team that struggled last year, finishing in 7th place in the Eastern Conference. They brought in Tyler Boyd and Drew Yearwood from LA Galaxy and New York Red Bulls, respectively. Sim Surge will begin his first full year with Nashville. And of course, Hani Mukhtar is still at the club. But I don't think they've done enough still. And yes, anytime you have Hani Mukhtar, you're going to be in games. But Hani can't continue year after year carrying this team on his back. And so I have Nashville missing out on the playoffs this year. In 9th, Inter Miami, which I'm sure for some people maybe this is controversial, but, I agree with all these people that have been saying, they look like a tournament team. And I agree wholeheartedly. This team looks like they're set up for tournaments. And once MLS playoffs come, well, you know what that is? It's a tournament. And so they're going to navigate through the season. They're going to barely scrape into the playoffs. But they're going to get there. They're going to win some trophies. The attack looks wonderful on paper with Messi, Suarez, and Gomez. But what about their defense? They leaked goals last season. They continue to leak goals this preseason. Julian Gressel, Luis Suarez, and Nicolas Freire look like good signings, especially Nicolas Freire. But they're going to be relying heavily on a 37-year-old and a soon-to-be 37-year-old. And they simply won't play every game this season in MLS. Yeah, there's going to be games this year. I'm sure they're going to win by 4 or 5 goals. But that's not going to be every game, with this being a significantly older team than most in MLS. In 8th, I have New York Red Bulls. New York Red Bulls, they hired Sandro Schwartz as the new manager this offseason. They didn't lose a lot of key pieces. The only one I would argue was Omir Fernandez. But they brought in a huge player. And Emil Forsberg from RB Leipzig. And he'll be the perfect person to set Dante Vanzeir up with scoring chances. In 7th, I have New York City. New York City, they've got younger and finally seem like they have a roster in place after a complete waste of a season last year. Hannes Wolf, Augustin Ojeda, Jovan Mijatovic were all brought in to help the attack. So, yeah, finally looks like New York City have a team in place. So I do have them getting back in the playoffs once again this season. In 6th, New England, I think Caleb Porter is a really good hire by New England. He's a proven winner. Yet towards the end in his tenure with Columbus, it started to go south. But will Caleb be the guy to get New England over the hump? Get them into MLS Cup this season? Yes, Gustavo Bo is no longer a Revs player, which is a huge blow, but they still have Carlos Gil. And anytime you have Carlos Gil, you're always in it, just like you are always in it if you're Nashville with Hani Mukhtar. And don't forget, they still have DeJuan Jones, Brandon Bry, both fullbacks that are amongst the top 5 best in their position. Both of those players have been linked away from the club, and they're still here. And then, once again, they've looked like they've locked down their goalkeeper spot with Henrik Ravos, the Slovakian goalkeeper. And I don't know, will they sell another goalkeeper for big money after half of a season? Maybe. 5th, Atlanta United. And I can see Atlanta finishing higher if both Thiago Almada and Giacomakis stay through the summertime. The club lost Miles Robinson to FC Cincinnati via free agency, but they brought in Norwegian center back Gregerson to replace him. And so I do once again think Atlanta gets into the playoffs. I do think if, like I said, Thiago Almada and Giacomakis stay the whole season, yeah, they could really fight for a top 3 spot in the Eastern Conference this year. And 4th, I have the Philadelphia Union. If they stay healthy, if Julian Kranza stays the whole season, then you got to like the chances of this team. They kept their core group of players here. These core players have got them into the playoffs the last 3-4 seasons. Union decided to run it back again, and we'll see what happens. In 3rd, I have FC Cincinnati. Cincinnati lost a lot of key pieces this offseason with selling Brandon Vasquez to Monterrey. Yerson Mascaro's loan was up, and starting right back Santiago Arias are all gone. But Cincinnati did bring in 2 of the more sought-after free agents. And like I said, Miles Robinson, and they brought in Corey Bird from Houston, who had 8 goals last year with the Dynamo. Busy offseason for Cincinnati, and it continued with bringing in Luca Walano, a 23-year-old right back, and then they brought in Pavel Busha to replace Junior Moreno in the midfield. And so Cincinnati, after winning the Supporters Shield, after coming in first place in the Eastern Conference, I don't think that happens again this season. But regardless, Pat Noonan's still there. They brought in a lot of good pieces. Cincinnati's going to continue to be good. And second is the reigning MLS champs, Columbus Crew. The core of this team is still in place. They brought in a promising U22 signing Former Union homegrown player Derek Jones was also signed. We all saw how Columbus looked under Wilfried Nancy, and they're still going to continue to be one of the best attacking teams in MLS. There's no way around that. And then in first, this is a shock, I'm sure, to a lot of people, Orlando City. But I am so high on Orlando City this season. They brought in former Atlanta striker, Colombian international Luis Monreal, and former Seattle Sounders midfielder Nicolas Ladero. Both of those players bring a ton of experience to this fairly young squad. Martin Ojeda and Facundo Torres will create plenty of chances for Luis. And somehow Duncan McGuire, after the transfers didn't get done to Blackburn Rivers, Duncan's still here. It's a great player to come off the bench. They sold Antonio Carlos to Fluminense, but they replaced him with David Brekalo from Viking FC in Norway. And I think Orlando City is going to be a really, really, really good team this year in MLS. And so I saved the Western Conference for last just because I just don't get a chance to watch too many games from the Western Conference because we all know games start so late. But in 14th, I have Minnesota United. Starting the season off with no manager is never a smart thing to do. The front four on paper looks good, and Timo Pukki and Renaso, Robert Lourdes, and Banji. But other than that, I think this team's going to struggle. In 13th, I have Austin FC. Didn't do enough to improve this team that finished in 12th last season. Yes, I have Jerussi, who's a candidate for MVP every season, but Austin needed to have a lot better of an offseason, and they did not do that at all. In 12th, Portland Timbers. They brought in Crepeau from LAFC, Kamal Miller from Inter Miami. They have 2 open DP spots. Phil Neville's the manager there. Will he have a better tenure than he did in Inter Miami, or will Phil just continue to be a disappointing manager? We shall see. I mean, if they have 2 solid DP signings during the summertime or with this window being open, I don't see why Portland couldn't be a playoff team, but a lot of uncertainty with this team by the time we're recording this podcast, so I don't feel comfortable putting them in the playoffs yet. In 11th, Houston Dynamo. Coco Carrasco, star player for them, has mentioned that he wants to move back to Europe. Hector Herrera is injured, as is Nelson Quinones. They lost Corey Bird in free agency, and I'm just not sure this team has enough depth. I thought they maybe overperformed a little bit last year in MLS, but I'm sure, it pains me to put them in 11th, and I'm sure they're probably going to prove me wrong. In 10th is San Jose Earthquake. Losing Cade Cal and Jamiro Montero, those are 2 really, really big losses. They bring in Pellegrino, who was the Golden Boot winner the last 2 seasons in Norway, but losing just, again, 2 key players. They lose Nathan, they lose and Jonathan Mensah. You lose key defensive players for you over the years. It's big losses there in San Jose. In 9th is RSL. They lost Jefferson Severino once again. Damir Kreilach, he's also left the club. I think on paper they still have a good team, but I don't know if it's enough to get them on a deep run in the playoffs. I think they're barely squeak by in that 9th place spot. 8th, LA Galaxy. They bring in 2 young wingers in Joseph Pansil and Gabriel Peck. I do think the Galaxy wound up making the playoffs this year, but barely. Vancouver in 6th. In 7th. Sorry, they finished last season in 6th. They bring in Damir Kreilach from RSL. I think, under their manager, I think they're always going to have a chance. Very, very good manager. But again, I don't think they're super strong team. Sporting Kansas City, they finished in 8th last year. I have them in 6th this year. They have a good core group of players, and we saw last year once they got healthy towards the middle of the season, that's why they made a run into the playoffs last year in 5th. And I did not want to buy into all the pieces that the Rapids had brought in. Some really solid players for them over the years, and Danny Wilson, Jack Price, Diego Rubio, and William Yarbrough are all out in Colorado. But they brought in multiple new players, with majority of those players playing in MLS, and Zach Steffen, Omir Fernandez, Jordy Mihailovic, and Sam Vines. And this one's going to burn me. I know it is. Because usually I don't buy into a new manager, basically a brand new team, but that's exactly what I'm doing with the Rapids. So I have them in 5th. St. Louis, they improved the 2 fullback signings with Thomas Totland and Nicholas Dyer. Chris Durkin was also a huge get from DC United. I think St. Louis will be fine in 4th place. In 3rd, FC Dallas. They bring in a huge player from Benfica, Peter Musa, for a reported $9.7 million. Promising Romanian youngster, Ines Sali. I think this club has enough depth and promise despite Alan Velasco missing probably the whole season with that torn ACL that he suffered in the playoffs last November. I have LAFC in 2nd, and it's back-to-back years we've seen them reach MLS Cup. They lose Kalen Acosta, they lose Chiellini, they lose Crepeau, they lose Palacios, second best left back in MLS in my opinion, and maybe no Carlos Vela. Definitely key pieces lost for sure, but they got younger and brought in a World Cup winner in Hugo Lloris, the former Tottenham Hotspur goalkeeper, Thomas Angel, David Martinez, Umar Campos, and Edward Etuesta were all brought in this winter transfer window for LAFC. And then in 1st, I have Seattle Sounders. The Sounders brought in my opinion, he's probably going to be the best player signed in MLS this season, and that is Pedro de la Vega, who I'm so high on this guy. Surprised that he's not going straight to Europe, that he's coming to MLS from Argentina. The core group is still there for Seattle. Brian Schmelzer is a terrific coach, and he's going to continue to get the most out of this club. So, and those are my standings. I'll go over it real quick. 15th, Toronto. 14th, Montreal. 13th, Chicago. 12th, Charlotte. 11, DC. 10, Nashville. 9, Inter Miami. 8, Red Bull. 7, New York City. 6, New England. 5, Atlanta. 4, Philly. 3, Cincy. 2, Columbus. 1, Orlando. In the West, we have Minnesota, 14, 13, Austin, 12, Portland, 11, Houston, 10, San Jose, 9, RSL, 8, LA Galaxy, 7, Vancouver, 6, Sporting Kansas City, 5th, Colorado, 4, St. Louis, 3, Dallas, 2, LAFC, 1st, Seattle. And for my MLS Cup final prediction, I have Seattle Sounders versus Columbus Crew once again. And if you're asking me who's going to win it, I think I'm leaning Seattle. Seattle's a really good team. And not saying that Columbus isn't either. I think, as long as they have Wilfried Nancy, they're going to be a favorite in MLS. And so those are my predictions. 3 finalists, we can get this out of the way for MLS MVP. 3, Cucho. 2, Denny Bwanga. 1, Messi, because everybody's going to vote Messi. Leading goal scorers, 3, Cucho. 17, Denny Bwanga. 19, 22 for Messi I have. And what do I want to see from the Union? I mean, I want to see them just finish off their scoring chances. I have no doubt that they're going to continue to create chances. I don't know if they're going to finish. And if the Union can finish off their chances, of course, you got to think that, okay, well, they'll have a chance at winning a trophy at some point this season. But yeah, they've got to finish off their chances. I don't know if they've done enough to get better depth-wise. You're asking a lot for these young players that they brought in to contribute in multiple competition, to carry the load when the Union are missing key players for multiple reasons this year. Do I think the Union realistically can win a trophy? Yes, but you can make the same argument for so many other teams. And I do ultimately think it's going to be another season where the Union, unfortunately, don't win a trophy. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/freekickpod. Going to have a Substack website up very soon, I believe. So, should be a nice place to write, upload podcasts, YouTube videos. So none of that's going to change, you guys. Wherever you're listening to your podcast, we'll continue to listen to them wherever you're listening to them now. If you want to watch the videos that I upload on YouTube still on YouTube, you can do that. But I'm just going to give people a new option with Substack if you guys, for whatever reason, don't have social media. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.